Ian Garry versus Colby Covington has just been announced for UFC 303. I'm kidding, that's not true. Of course not. Colby Covington isn't accepting the fight. Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page was recently announced for UFC 303. It's going to serve as the featured bout of the night for the card, and it proves that Colby Covington completely ducked Ian Garry. Now, I think that the Ian Garry versus MVP fight is a cool matchup, but it is in no way an optimal fight, and I actually think it's bad for the UFC welterweight division. So on today's video, I'm going to discuss why I don't like this matchup, and I'm probably going to go on a bit of a Colby Covington tirade due to his unwillingness to fight against Ian Garry, as well as give my early prediction and reaction to this recently announced fight. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give a final grade to the UFC 303 pay-per-view. So make sure you guys smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I got to go on the tirade to start. Colby Covington is entitled, and he has Dana White privilege, and that is why we're getting this fight between MVP and Ian Garry as opposed to the proper fight, which was Ian Garry versus Colby Covington. Now, this is a battle between two emerging contenders with incredible striking skill, and there is a legitimate fun factor to this fight, surely, but I just think it's at the wrong time because a loss for either of these fighters right now is extremely detrimental. To me, the proper fights were Michael Venom Page versus Wonderboy and Ian Garry versus Colby Covington. In a sense, it would be the battle of the old guard versus the new guard. Instead, because of Covington's unwillingness to take a risk and take a major fight and be a BMF like Dustin Poirier. Instead, he's more of a bitchiest motherfucker. He doesn't take the big spot. We end up with this matchup. A win for either of them would be great and all, but to be fair, it wouldn't necessarily prove that they can hang with the elite of 170 pounds. Now, I know Colby Covington hasn't had a legit ranked win in the welterweight division in a very long time, but he is a former title challenger. He did go 5 rounds with Leon, and him and Ian Garry's narrative that was already set because of the disrespect that was there was a perfect clash, but it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. He's not doing it. I wanted old guard versus new. Not happening. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Now, even following this fight, I really believe there's going to be question marks around either fighter. There's still going to be concerns about how they'll compete against some of the better fighters in the UFC welterweight division. And having an old guard versus new guard type matchup, I think, would have eliminated at least some of those debates. And I think it would have been just better for the division. But okay, I don't have control of it because the refusal to fight up-and-coming opposition by Colby Covington is just something that we have to deal with. It pisses me off. It should piss you off too. Covington is angling towards a fight against Gilbert Burns. I know for a fact. He wants a matchup against a guy that's still amongst the elite, but not really, and towards the downslope of his career. I think that's the mentality. I'd be surprised if Covington would even be willing to accept a fight against Shavkat Rakhmonov in a potential #1 contender situation. I really don't think that Colby Covington deserves to be in this type of situation. I don't think he should have this much power. He's acting like he's Conor McGregor out here. He shouldn't. He's not that much of a draw. He said, oh, I'll fight welterweight debuting Charles Oliveira. He's angling towards fights I just think he doesn't deserve to be in the position to call for. And that's truth to be told. He's never held an undisputed title. He was an interim champ, and he was flexing that interim belt all the time. But when it came to crunch time, he is 0-3 in UFC title fights and should not be treated as a former world champion. So I am pissed. Enough of the Colby tirade, though, because I do want to discuss this matchup and at least talk about some positivity. I'm trying to accept what's happening. It is what it is. It's going to be okay. It's going to be a good fight. Garry versus MVP is an intriguing stylistic clash. I think it's a fun matchup. MVP is the king of striking from range and recently outpointed Kevin Holland for a clean UFC debut win by decision. And I think that, truth to be told, it's a hard matchup for Ian Garry. This range style of fighting is something he's never seen before. I mean, nobody's really ever seen it. But Ian Garry, as a 26-year-old up-and-coming contender, definitely hasn't faced this style of striker in the past. Now, Gary's coming off of a split decision win against Jeff Neal. But let's be honest, he was running a lot in that fight, and there was moments for him. It definitely didn't build the enthusiasm for Ian Garry against, some dangerous strikers. And I think MVP becomes a hard stylistic matchup. Another reason too. Why? Zero takedown threat from Ian Garry. He's going to be forced into a pure kickboxing fight with one of the most unorthodox and tricky strikers from distance in mixed martial arts history. As MVP style really flows and goes, it's just hard for guys that even have traditionally good striking skills to take any advantageous spots. Like maybe you catch him with a leg kick and hit him with an uppercut like Douglas Lima, the one of one attempt. But I doubt that happens here. I really do. I think the best option for Ian Garry is to go with a game plan minded around ripping the leg kicks if you're forced on the outside, tying up in the clinch and wearing on Michael Venom Page, and maybe even surprising with some takedowns, something that I'm not sold Ian Garry has the ability to do. Working in the clinch against the cage with elbows and knees, potentially making this more of a dirty brawl. But the truth to be had as well is Ian Garry lacks punching power. He's not heavy-handed. So how is he going to knock out Michael Venom Page? It would need to be a perfectly placed punch, or it would need to be a devastating high kick at the absolute perfect time. Both of which are like lottery ticket wins, low likelihood of actually coming through. If you're telling me this fight is going distance for certain, and let's say hypothetically you had somebody with the Oracle that said, hey, fight's going distance for sure, we should throw all the heat down and fight goes distance. But besides the betting side, I would assume that it's Michael Venom Page winning a unanimous decision, giving Ian Garry a lot of trouble from the outside, and giving Ian Garry his first loss as a professional, which I don't like. Because the side of MVP is simply a technically superior distance striker with a reach advantage as well of 5 inches. That's a factor. Now, I know Michael Venom Page is not necessarily known for his boxing skill set, but he does have decent peppering shots from the outside. And Ian Garry, also not being a high pedigreed boxer, is going to be forced to be attacking legs a lot. And I don't think can land that devastating blow on Michael Venom Page, who's incredibly unorthodox. I don't like it, man. I really don't like it, because this is a situation of a lose-lose. If I'm the UFC, I wouldn't have made this fight, because you have 2 fighters emerging as exciting contenders and fun striking styles. And let's be honest, for a vast majority of the fan base, emphatic striking, knockouts, or even just clean striking skill is what sells, right? That is what gets a lot of fans pretty hyped up. But one of them is deemed to take an L for sure. So it's either Michael Venom Page ends up being an absolute bust of a Bellator signing, loses his second UFC fight. And granted, you could say, oh, but Michael Chandler did. Yeah, but it was a world title fight. It wasn't against a prospect contender on the come up who was 26. It was a fight against Charles Oliveira for the undisputed belt. MVP is going to be losing before really making that starch and run up the ranks. You could say, oh, but I'm still down for the Wonder Boy fight after. Sure, that fight could still happen, but beyond it, it's very unlikely that there will be title implications for a 37-year-old Michael Venom Page with a loss here to Ian Garry. Truth told, I think that Ian Garry, even with a loss, could still eventually find himself in the world title picture. I think he could still eventually climb his way back to the throne, because he is only 26, and Michael Venom Page is an extremely weird style to deal with, and he's going to give strikers hell for his entire UFC run. And I think my early prediction for the fight is going to be Michael Venom Page to outpoint Ian Garry en route to a decision. And I don't want this to happen, because I was excited to see Ian Garry maintain the undefeated streak. I really want the Colby Covington fight, but he's going to have to claw, scratch, and nail to get it, and it doesn't seem likely. The range striking favoring Michael Venom Page, for me, is such a big factor. I was trying to sell myself on coming on here and telling you guys I'm going to pick Ian Garry, I'm going to take him by knockout, or I'm going to pick Ian Garry by decision. But I just can't find that within myself. When you look at Ian Garry's recent opponents, so the Jeff Neal split decision is fine. He put a beating on Neil Magny, who's more of a hugfest, grind in the clinch type fighter, and Neil Magny nearly lost to Phil Rowe recently. Okay, he knocked out Daniel Rodriguez, but that's nowhere near the striking level of Michael Venom Page. He got dropped, but was able to finish Kenan Song. Michael Venom Page is a really bad matchup for Ian Garry. and they're putting it on the Conor McGregor card. So the winner really has a massive chance to build their star factor. If Ian Garry can somehow pull through, it would be marvelous for his career, but I just can't see it. It would have to be, I don't want to say a fluke. It wouldn't have to be a fluke. It would have to be an excellent on excellent performance. He would have to land the perfectly placed strike. And I just think he's going to end up getting frustrated with the striking skill set on the opposite side by Michael Venom Page, from range, throwing kicks, moving a ton, hands low, shots from the outside. It's too awkward. It's too weird. And even though Michael Venom Page lost in a bare knuckle fight to Mike Perry, he went 5 rounds, nearly beat him. Wasn't it 6 rounds? Didn't he go to the super round, right? They did like a it's not a draw round. Am I wrong about that? Yeah, they did. They went to a 6th round. And Michael Venom Page was forced to fight with just hands there. And I know you can say, oh, it's a different sport, but that shows to the level of striking skill that Page has when you look at what Mike Perry has done. Like, he dispatched a Luke Rockhold with relative ease, and he just knocked out Thiago Alves. So I'm worried for Ian Garry. I think he's going to end up taking his first loss, and I'm pretty upset that it has to happen because, unfortunately, someone has to take a loss, and I think it's just unfortunate that Colby Covington is the reason that we're put into this shitty predicament when he should be forced to fight guys on the come up. Like, he needs to pull a Dustin Poirier, Benoit Saint-Denis. Ian Garry has way more hype on him than Benoit Saint-Denis did when Dustin Poirier said yes, and then Poirier won and he got a title shot. And maybe if Colby Covington was able to win against Ian Garry, there would be a jump in his stock. And who knows, he could find himself in a title picture once again just because of the respect earned from taking on a dangerous up-and-comer. And if there's the logjam at the top, which granted, I guess there is a logjam with Bilal getting the shot, Shavkat on the come-up. Maybe Colby Covington is angling for a fight against Shavkat, but I'd be slightly surprised because that's a really hard matchup. I think more than likely he wants a fight against even Wonderboy, who's a good stylistic matchup, or another aging fighter in Gilbert Burns. Bullshit. He shouldn't keep his ranking where it's at, man. He shouldn't be in the top 5 if he's not willing to take on the next leg of opposition on the come-up. Now, regardless of all my damn frustrations with everything, and this has turned into like a pretty negative video with me absolutely complaining a shitload, I do think that this is a good fight. And a piece of me wants to be wrong and hopes that Ian Garry can shock everybody. But it's just hard for me to say. I can't officially predict that Ian Garry's going to beat Michael Venom Page. It's just when I play the fight out in my head, I see the awkward distance striking from MVP as just such a massive factor, and I see him outpointing Garry for a decision win, especially a young 26-year-old Garry. Maybe if Garry would have been 2 years older with some more experience, we're in a different talk. It is what it is, but regardless, it saves 303's pay-per-view because as of yesterday, the 303 pay-per-view looked like trash. We had a great co-main event because, damn, you guys know, Hill versus Alberg. I did a reaction video for that. My God, I'm excited for that fight. Main event, of course. Chandler McGregor, of course I'm excited. But, like, outside of that, the best fight on the card was the 40-year-old Cub Swanson and Andre Fili, which was not optimal. I think that if you're under the McGregor card, superstardom can definitely be something that's built, and maybe that's the intention with putting Page versus Garry together to give either one of them a chance to really emerge as the up-and-coming contender in the UFC welterweight division, and instead of going the route of the old guard versus new, having to prove themselves against the old guard, kind of just building it off the McGregor hype train narrative. But I don't think it's the right move. I'm happy that we get a good pay-per-view. I'm happy that we're going to enjoy the hell out of UFC 303. I'll be here covering it, loving it. I'll enjoy it when it comes, but I am going to hold a damn grudge against Colby Covington for causing 2 of the most exciting up-and-coming striking contenders in the UFC welterweight division to just simply face off too soon. And that is my big argument. It's just too soon for this fight. I would have rather seen MVP get a win over Wonderboy and even Ian Garry beat Colby, and that's the #1 contender fight then. Just not now. Unfortunate. Is what it is. Guys, let me know what you thought in the comments. Do you agree with me? Or do you think this was the right fight to make? Do you think that it shouldn't be the old guard versus the new? Would you rather see the new blood in the UFC face off against one another? I want to know. And also drop your early prediction for the fight. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.